Over the weekend, the Senate pushed the bipartisan infrastructure bill over another hurdle. And of course, that is the legislative filibuster. Now, that requires 60 votes in the Senate in order to pass any piece of legislation, with a few exceptions on reconciliation bills. Now, senators easily overcame another 60-vote hurdle on a vote of 68 to 29. As many as 20 Republicans are expected to join Democrats in the early or evenly split Senate for what could be a robust final tally. If approved, it would go to the House. So I want to be clear in stating something that I hope we've been clear on so far. The Senate infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, is different from what's being referred to as the reconciliation infrastructure bill, or what some are now referring to as the budget bill, which we'll get to in just a second. But moving back to the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which of course allocates an additional $550 billion in new spending. The Senate could pass the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill as early as Tuesday morning, Tuesday of this week. The plan, which calls for $550 billion in new spending on transportation, utilities, and broadband, is expected to get through the chamber with Democratic and Republican support. Now, it didn't pass easily, or this overcoming this hurdle did have a few hiccups. So I'm just gonna go to one video featuring Ted Cruz and the shenanigans he engaged in, where he thought he was making a good point, but as usual, only embarrassed himself. Let's watch.
As Admiral Akbar said in Star Wars, it's a trap. This is a trap. This is a trap. Now listen, for Democrats, it's what they campaign on. If you're a Democrat, you want to raise taxes and raise spending. You want more debt from China. That's what Democrats do. But for Republicans, come on, guys. We're like Charlie Brown with Chuck Schumer being Lucy in the football. And you've got Republicans happily running, going, oh, he's gonna keep the football, he's gonna keep the football. And every time Lucy pulls the football up back, and we go up in the air and land in our rear. It'd be nice for Republicans not to fall for it again.
So Ted Cruz feels that this is a trap because voting in favor of the bipartisan infrastructure deal paves the way for the passage of the reconciliation infrastructure bill, which includes everything that we actually care about. The human infrastructure components, funding for childcare, elder care, free community college, the honestly more robust version of the infrastructure deal. Now, Cenk, I wanted to get your thoughts on what Ted Cruz said there, but more importantly, like this strategy. Like, do you think that Democrats are handling this appropriately, right? There seems to be this notion that they're definitely gonna pass a reconciliation bill, but I don't really see a clear strategy, with the exception of progressives standing in the way, saying that they'd block the bipartisan bill unless there's a clear path forward for reconciliation. What do you think?
So good news is we're gonna find out everything about Congress real soon. Okay, so I'll explain. First, I want to say about Ted Cruz. I'm really, like, Anna's the salt queen, right? But I've also gotten to a point where I'm tired of covering the liars. So everything Ted Cruz says is a lie, and I don't want to engage with the mainstream media that says, oh no, that's offensive. You have to take his lies and take it at face value and pretend that it has 50% chance of being true and has validity. It doesn't have any validity. And he's a showman, and a terrible showman at that. He's such a poor, great actor. Republican voters can see it from a mile away. Trump is a far more sophisticated con man. So as Ted Cruz does these kind of speeches, even the Republicans don't buy it. They know he's a scam artist. So anyways, now on to relevant things. Look, there is one point that the Republicans are a little bit right about. So we do an honest show. So we'll cover no matter what, as it actually is. So they're doing two different infrastructure bills. They were both called infrastructure bills. Now the larger one is being called a budget bill. That's a bit of optics that the Democrats are doing, okay? It's harmless optics, but it is optics. It's not, it was infrastructure, still is infrastructure, and it has more of the Green New Deal in the larger one that's now being called the budget bill. That part is true, okay? And so why are they doing two different bills if the Democrats can pass the larger one without any Republican votes? So that means instead of doing 1 trillion and 3.5 trillion, they can just combine it if they have enough votes and just pass it as 4.5 trillion. So the 1 trillion, there's two possible explanations and neither one of them is good for the Democrats now. So the Republicans are right that splitting it is weird, right? And some of the ones that are opposed to it go, why the hell are they splitting it? They're gonna trick you guys and they're gonna vote for the $3.5 trillion. Well, they're not tricking you, they're saying they're gonna vote on the $3.5 trillion one. Okay, it's actually a trick in the reverse on Democratic voters, okay? So I'll get to what's most likely, but second most likely is they say, well, it's okay, we help the Republicans with their marketing by doing a bipartisan one. Now, it also helps Joe Biden's marketing. That's why he's presumably doing it, because he ran on being bipartisan. But the Republicans will get to say, we did the infrastructure bill. We did infrastructure, okay? Now, the reality is it lets them vote against 75% of the funding for infrastructure, but it still gives Republicans credit for doing infrastructure. So that's a giant marketing help to the Republican Party. That's totally needless if they can pass the larger one with only Democratic votes. That's inarguable. Anyone in the media that tells you that's not inarguable literally can't do math, right? So that's the best case scenario where the Democrats, as usual, help the Republican Party massively for no reason. Okay, now the worst case scenario. No, the most likely thing is the Democrats never meant it. They're just as much corporate stooges, their leadership is, as the Republicans are. So they're gonna actually do Lucy and Charlie Brown and pulling the football. Oh yeah, progressives, come this way, we're gonna vote on $3.5 trillion. Sure, it's gonna happen. Oh golly gee, we couldn't get Manchin or Sinema or any of the other rotating villains to say yes. So we can only do the bipartisan one. So everybody shut up and do unity. And we're all gonna yell at you and say, you're the worst and it's all your fault. If at the very last second, and they'll always leave it to the last second, so it'll seem like an emergency, right? The progressives didn't vote for it, it's their fault. So that is the most common game. And so we're all gonna find out together. We don't know it yet, you're all gonna find it out as we find out. If the Democrats actually pass the $3.5 trillion one from the Senate, and then the House passes it and it becomes law, holy cow, we've actually moved Congress and progressives have made a difference. I would love to give the Democratic Party credit for that. I would love it. It would be literally the first time in my lifetime, in covering politics for 25 years, I have never seen the Democrats mean it. Never, not once, okay? So if they mean it this time, that is a giant victory and you should give credit where credit is due. Now, if it's like every other time and they pull the football and they don't do the $3.5 trillion deal, that is when you will hear mainstream media do marketing for them. Propaganda, pure, worse than anything on Sputnik or anything that you see, like the North Korean television. They will tell you, oh no, we couldn't have done the $3.5 trillion. Everybody always knew it was not gonna be the $3.5 trillion. I can't believe progressives are preventing the $1 billion infrastructure deal. It's all the progressives' fault. They will all say it in unison. And the other good news is I don't care what the mainstream media says anymore. My job is to point out their lies.
So devil's advocate, Democrats now referring to the reconciliation infrastructure bill as the budget bill could be optics on behalf of the Democrats because of course, in order to pass a reconciliation bill, which would only require a simple majority in the Senate, you need to prove that it has an impact on the federal budget, right? So calling it a budget bill helps with that cause. Some red flags though that I wanted to mention is that you already have the Congressional Budget Office studying the impact of the reconciliation version of the infrastructure bill and pushing back a little bit in regard to whether or not it would qualify under the reconciliation process. But I want to be clear about something. The whole thing about reconciliation and the Senate parliamentarian, the Biden administration does not have to listen to the Senate parliamentarian, someone who is unelected, someone who can just easily be fired and the administration and the Democratic Party can move forward with the reconciliation bill and get it passed with a simple majority. The fact that we're already hearing about like, oh, well, the CBO is looking into this and we don't know if this $3.5 trillion now budget bill is going to qualify for the reconciliation process. We'll see how it plays out. But Nancy Pelosi on multiple occasions has said that she will not bring the bipartisan infrastructure bill for a vote on the House floor until the Senate passes both of the bills, meaning the reconciliation bill and the bipartisan bill. We'll see. We'll see if she's actually gonna follow through on her commitment there. Yeah. But there's that commitment, and then there's also progressive lawmakers in the House who claim that they'll block the bill. You're right, Cenk, there's gonna be a tremendous amount of pressure on them to not block the bill, to play along and to do whatever the corporate media and corporate donors want them to do. There's gonna be a lot of pressure, but this is the true test to see if they're willing to go through all of the disdain, all of the hatred that they're gonna get in the corporate media to do the right thing, which is to block the bipartisan bill unless it's abundantly clear that they can pass the reconciliation bill.
Okay, guys, everything is on the line and everything's gonna be decided. So Anna's absolutely right. Calling it the budget bill is a good thing because budgets must pass, right? So that's an indication that they actually want to pass it. Now, in the past, I would have told you there's no chance they're gonna pass that $3.5 trillion bill. If the corporations are not in favor of it, we live under 100% corporate rule. It has no, I would have said 0% chance. Now, I'm not telling you that now, okay? I'm telling you that there is some chance they pass it. Why? One, Bernie is saying 1,000 times over, it's gonna pass, and that this was the fruits of all of his labors and all the compromises. Now, if Bernie gets fooled on that, that is going to be devastating for him, okay? And so on the other hand, if he passes it, guys, people like me who were his critic on $15 minimum wage, etc., we all have to turn around and go, holy cow, he did it. Like, I've never seen it in my lifetime where corporate Democrats agree with progressives rather than vice versa. Okay, and what Anna said about Nancy Pelosi is critical. I've never seen Nancy Pelosi draw the line like that and say, I will pass progressive legislation, and if I don't, you should judge me on it. I've never seen it. So we're in unprecedented, uncharted territory. So it does have some chance of passing. But if it doesn't, if it was all a trick all along and the progressives fold and Nina Turner lost, then we're back to a dark place where there's no hope at all. So the progressives cannot fold. If they fold, it would be devastating.
It would be devastating not just for the future of their political careers, which I honestly don't care that much about. It would be devastating literally for the planet. Like, the reconciliation version of the infrastructure bill is the one that includes climate action. We need to address climate change. I mean, we need to go even further than what's in the reconciliation bill. But the reconciliation bill is a good start. And if they don't fight for that, I mean, it's just the future is incredibly bleak. By the way, the reconciliation bill, as I said before, includes everything that we actually want. So it's expansion of paid family and medical leave. You've got childcare programs, free community college, an extension of increased Affordable Care Act subsidies, universal pre-K. It's important to address how expensive education is for people. So free community college is a good start, although I would like to see it go further. But all of the human infrastructure stuff is included there. The extension of the child tax credits. We need this, we need to give Americans relief. This is finally a little bit of redistribution of wealth to the bottom instead of a redistribution to the top, as we're likely to get with the bipartisan version of the bill. Look, honestly, if progressives block the bipartisan bill because we're not gonna get the reconciliation bill and we get nothing on infrastructure at all, I would almost prefer that. Because the bipartisan bill is nothing but corporate handouts. There's some positive spending there for infrastructure improvements that we need, but we're privatizing public infrastructure through this. These are all of the physical infrastructure things that corporate America wants because it benefits them and their bottom line. So no, we need the reconciliation version of the bill. That's the bill that has everything that we need, everything that we want. We should be hyper focused on fighting for that.
So last two things on that. One of the reasons why there's also a little bit of hope is because the money is moving. Always follow the money. And so large Democratic donors now are beginning to understand, the planet is burning and we don't have a second planet. And so now this actually endangers me helping the other people. Who cares? But look, I might have billions, but I don't have enough money for this. By the way, bad guys and good guys, right? I know a good guy who's very wealthy and is now literally, he's given up on politics and he's a scientist. He's seen the numbers, there's no question about it. He's now going to go and move and buy tons of real estate as far north as he can and start building bunkers. That's real, okay? And that's a good guy who tried and tried and tried to fix it and thinks, nope, it's broken. We're not gonna be able to fix it in time. You gotta start preparing for a worst case scenario. Now, if enough donors thought that, they might actually be able to push the Democratic Party in the right direction. That's why it's not hopeless. But at the end of the day, what is the most likely outcome? The most likely outcome is the same outcome we've seen for the last 40 years of corporate rule, which is, and this is an important part of this, guys, they're gonna try to run out the clock while pretending there was nothing they could do. So when the $3.5 billion version of it comes up in the Senate, that's when Sinema will object, and then they'll go to the CBO, and then they will take tons and tons of time negotiating back and forth. None of it is meant to actually do negotiations. It's just meant to run out the clock. And then at the end, they'll go, oh my God, we're running out of time. So we got to pass the the $1 trillion version, the smaller version, the bipartisan version, and then we'll come back to the other one. We promise, we'll come back to the other one, right? And that's the oldest trick in the book. So what you will see with your own eyes as they start to run out the clock, and that's done on purpose. Thanks for watching the Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.